This is the second of the lectures for Prelude to and then Fighting of World War II, Chapter 34, America in the Second World War. Our first key term is mobilization. This is not only the preparation for fighting, but also in the fighting. On the left-hand side, you see that the soldier side of this, or the military side, that we have lots of different people in lots of different positions. In terms of mostly white soldiers, but all of them, they would either volunteer to enlist, they would be drafted, and then they had to go through significant amounts of training. This is again where we talked a little bit about the CCC's dual role of prepping people for military training. That is a long and difficult process. Women were a part of the military. They were not in combat positions, but they served many different roles in non-combat positions. Some of the groups are WWIIs, which work in the naval side of our military. WWIIs, which is in the Army Air Corps. They would fly airplanes from the factories to military bases where the soldiers would then take over. And then SPARs are part of the Coast Guard systems. African Americans served in huge numbers during World War II, but how they were not treated as equals. They served in segregated units, mostly non-combat positions. Once again, they would have been servant type of positions, so cooks, porters, truck drivers, things that were not combat. One of the offshoots of the problems that this poses is that combat pay is higher, so this is a governmental system that's instituting a little bit of a poverty system for these African Americans. Native Americans, as odd as it might be, were the highest percentage of people to volunteer based on their population. Some of the most famous groups are the code talkers that we have learned about. Their unique languages became nearly impossible to break, so they would report movements and do different sorts of messages in their native languages and then translate them into English. On the home front, one of the key ideas is the fact that everybody plays a part. This is a total war, not only in the fact that civilians pay a price in some of the deaths and destruction, but in the terms that everybody had a role, from children to women to elderly. Everybody did something. Some of the more famous things, obviously Rosie the Riveter, the image that is very iconic about World War II with women. But it's easy to forget that they begin serving the dual role. Not only do they go to the factories to fill the jobs that the men have left, but they're still staying home as wives and mothers. More than 50% of them maintain the role of wife and mother at home while serving as some sort of factory job as well. African Americans at home, once again, are still being discriminated against, and they do a lot of things to fight for equality. One of the great leaders of civil rights movement during World War II is A. Philip Randolph. He works very, very diligently to coordinate a massive strike and protest march into Washington, D.C., to the point where it was going to be very embarrassing for President Roosevelt. So the president passes an executive order, 8802, which bans all discrimination in hiring for military jobs. Japanese Americans also suffer a tremendous disservice to them, with the suspicion of treason after the attacks on Pearl Harbor on December 7th. President Roosevelt passes Executive Order 9066 and places them into internment camps. Major Supreme Court case Korematsu v. U.S. references, once again, like Schenck v. U.S. and several others that we talk about, where individual rights can be restricted in times of clear and present danger, in this case World War II. Some instances of some of the propaganda that deals with those issues, especially of rationing and things going on at home. Two different theaters, as we talked about, in the Pacific Theater versus Japan. Early stages are they push us back, push us back, push us back. In the very early days of the Pacific Theater War, we launch a raid led by Colonel Jimmy Doolittle, where we make sure to drop bombs on Japan because their emperor has made very, very dynamic promises that no bombs shall ever land on Japan. And we want to make sure to break that and to give a little bit of a morale boost to people at home. The map in the upper right-hand corner demonstrates the island hopping techniques where we have to get to different places in order to refuel, restage, refit, and then jump to the next islands to get closer and closer to mainland Japan up here in this area if we are going to have to do an invasion, or in terms of getting to these areas where the airplanes that we've got, such as the Enola Gay that will carry the atomic bombs, can get there and then safely return to their bases. Major battles that you need to look at some of the details with their names: Midway, Okinawa, Iwo Jima, and the Philippine Islands. There are tons and tons of others. End of the war processes are brought on by the Manhattan Project and the development of a new weapon never having been used before and never having been used in war since: the atomic bombs. We dropped 2 of them, one on Hiroshima and one on Nagasaki. Japan eventually surrenders in August of 1945. Keep in mind that's after Germany. When you see the European side, they surrender first. So this is actually the last place that the war is being fought. And here's the European theater sides. We have battles going on in North Africa. That is the first tests of U.S. soldiers, is pushing into the North African frontier to push the Italians and Germans out of there. This is what USSR has been begging for. It's the second front. They want to be able to start having others fight Germany on the Western Front instead of just the Eastern Front battles that they've been fighting. So we also invade what's called the soft underbelly through Sicily and Italy to come up through and begin to push Germany out of there and turn Italy to the Allied side. Probably the single biggest turning point in the war, definitely the biggest turning point in the war in Europe, is D-Day, June 6th, 1944. This is not one of the big dates, but if you can learn that one, it is very important. The map in the upper right-hand corner shows the 5 beaches: Sword, Juno, Gold, Omaha, and Utah, and the different groups that were responsible for invading them. Omaha Beach of the American side, as small as it looks on the map, is the deadliest battle zone, and it is the one that is very, very famous. This battle leads to the liberation of France and begins the squeezing in of Germany. After this battle, it's a process of just continuous pushing in, surrounding, making more soldiers surrender until eventually we make all of Germany surrender. Some of the battles that you need to know about: Operation Market Garden is a massive failure. It was an idea of a British general, and it just did not plan out and work. It was too long and stretched out without enough ability to supply. Battle of the Bulge is the last hurrah of the German offensive. This is a winter battle in December 44, January 45. Mr. Ryder, who some of you know at the junior high, his dad was a member of the Red Ball Express, which is that group that you see with all of the trucks and things in the bottom right-hand corner. There's a great story of several thousand American soldiers surrounded in the town of Bastogne. The German general leading their troops writes a very nice letter complimentary of the bravery and the courageousness and things. It's a whole 1.5 pages, 2 pages long, celebrating all of this and asking them to surrender. The American commander, as American commanders often do, writes one word on the paper and sends it back to him: nuts. Basically saying, we're here until you wipe us all out. We're going to fight for Bastogne no matter what. It was a very, very key part of the Battle of the Bulge. They held on. General Patton, one of the main military leaders that you should know out of the United States, comes in and reinforces them. This then begins the push to Berlin, which is us and the Soviets on the eastern side of Germany, squeezing until finally in May of 45, the Germans surrender. On the home front, this is one of the things that becomes extremely important to think about and know about in World War II. We have a lot of control of the economics going on. You see the Office of Price Administration. This is where you see rationing books. You see the advertisement on the right where there are ceiling of prices, and there's a lot of control of going on in the economy. We are coming out of the Great Depression, and we don't want things to happen poorly. With the direction of A. Philip Randolph and the protests we mentioned earlier, we see the establishment of the Fair Employment Practice Commission, which continues until today to make sure that hiring practices and things that are going on are fair and equal. War Production Board, War Labor Board, WWII campaign, the $1 a year men, all of those deal with the fact that everything we're making in the country's going to the war. We're not making Buicks, Chevys, and Fords anymore. We're making tanks, Jeeps, airplanes, bombs, guns, and bullets now. Everything economically is devoted to the war effort. On the home front, we still see that there are racial issues and differences in groups. A lot of the men going to fight the war were farmers, agriculturalists, so we beg Central Americans, Mexicans in particular, to come to our country. This is called the Braceros program. We beg them to come here and help farm and work for us. Fashion riots with those people, with the the Mexicans that have come over to our country and things. There's different cultures. There's some different rioting. And so what we see is a zoot suit in the central picture here, the long coat, baggy pants, commonly worn by the Latino culture in the age. And they would interact with soldiers and things turned badly. They didn't like them being here. The soldiers didn't like the Mexicans being here, and there are a lot of rioting, especially in Southern California. CORE is the Congress on Racial Equality, another group of African Americans that are working to try to get equal rights. Post-war problems that we are going to start seeing before the war even ends. They are not happy. The Allied powers are figuring out what's going on. There are two major conferences that deal with these issues. The Yalta Conference happens first in Iran. The big three get together, Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt, and they negotiate what they're going to do in terms of end-of-war processes. They decide that Germany must offer an unconditional surrender, that they're going to divide Germany into 4 different sections. USSR promises 2 things for us, that they will allow free elections, and that the USSR will join in the fight against Japan. The second conference is the Potsdam Conference. Post-Roosevelt's passing away, Harry Truman is now the president. Stalin is the same leader of USSR, and Churchill is still the leader of Great Britain. At this one, they are now focusing on other parts of the war, namely the unconditional surrender being required of Japan and a lot of the dismantling of their systems of government, and then more specifically how we're going to divide and run Germany. What you see here, this large picture, is one of the maps that was at the Potsdam Conference, and you can see this is the country of Germany that I'm kind of tracing out here. And you see that this section is going to be run by the USSR. These two are going to be governed by France. This is Great Britain, and these parts are USA. All right. City of Berlin, completely surrounded by the Soviet sector. I don't think that'll be a problem anytime in the future. Oh, wait a second. Yeah, it's going to be a problem. As soon as both of these conferences are over, issues begin to develop between the United States, Great Britain, France, and Russia, or the Soviet Union more appropriately. After Yalta, we look like we're getting more worked over by them and everything. And then during the Potsdam Conference, Harry Truman, the new president of the United States, definitely is viewed as getting the short end of the stick. It looks like we're giving away too many things to the Soviets, and our public immediately starts feeding into that. Many of our military leaders speak up against this as well, and they fear that communism may be a problem in our future for our country. And George Patton gets in a lot of hot water because he says we ought to turn the Germans to our side, turn our guns against the Soviets, and start fighting them right now, because that's going to be what the next war is anyhow. Got just a few seconds left. I hope that you have enjoyed this. There are a lot of other things about World War II. I could do this for days and days and days, but unfortunately I've got 15 minutes and I've used 14 minutes and 30 seconds of it already. I hope you continue to, again, study your reading guides, the terms and the ideas that are in those packets that I've given you in class, being prepared and looking at stuff for test on Tuesday. Thank you.